Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I'm talking to you live from the bridge of the USS Cerritos, where we have just repelled a massive Packlet invasion. And it is so awesome to finally be here on the Cerritos with Captain Freeman and Mariner and Beckett and Tendi and Rutherford and the rest of the crew of our favorite Star Trek show. I am your host, Josh Pritchett, or now Ensign Josh Pritchett of Starfleet, coming to you as always, and my friend and partner in crime, Chris Pavone. Chris, how you doing today?
Good morning, everyone. Buenos días a todos nuestros amables oyentes. Guten Morgen. Bonjour. Well, I must say that repelling that attack took a lot out of me. So it's a way to decompress. I think we should talk about the latest episode of Lower Decks and give people the lowdown on Lower Decks.
Yes, absolutely. And this week, I would have to say that the prophets were definitely with us, weren't they, Chris?
I have to say, Josh, that after the season premiere, this was my favorite episode of the season so far, and it
Yeah.
might even edge ahead of the season premiere just slightly.
Yeah, I think so. I think part of it was the magic of us going back to our favorite star base and seeing some beloved characters that we have not seen in a very long time, and we've missed greatly. And also the fact that it felt like both a Lower Decks episode and a Deep Space Nine episode. It really was. It really just kind of, I think, hit a lot of buttons. Um, we definitely saw some growth with a lot of our characters, like Tindy, and definitely with Mariner and her new girlfriend Jennifer, and we got to, as I said before, we saw some wonderful friends in Colonel Kira and our old buddy Quark, who is doing very well. Remember, folks, when you're on Deep Space Nine, come to Quarks. Don't walk, run. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I think we should go ahead and jump right in it, and let's make this happen. Let's fly and do our weekly review of the episode.
I agree.
Yes. Okay. So, uh, what we had happen on this week, and here's the real me. Sorry, folks. This week, StarTrek.com has added a avatar generator. If you go over there, we've posted the link to the site, and you can go over there, and you too can become a crew member of the USS Cerritos. Uh, just feel free to come play with it. It's really a lot of fun, and as you can see, I think it was a pretty good likeness of me. Without the glasses and looking rather buff, so, and there's the link, so please feel free to beam on over after you watch our episode today, and let them know that we sent you, and post those likenesses to your social media and Facebook accounts. We'd love to see them, or send them here to us here at the show. We might even put them up here. So, um, Chris, you think you might want to make an avatar between now and next week?
I will consider it.
I will consider. I'm okay. So, this week, the Cerritos is flying to a rendezvous point. They don't tell us initially what it is, uh, to open trade negotiations with a race from the Gamma Quadrant, uh, to open up more trade post Dominion War. And they are essentially in charge of bringing gifts, tributes to this race. Apparently, they're very gift orientated. And it's another captain is actually going to take the lead on negotiations. However, when that starship is called away for an emergency, Captain Freeman finds that she has to take over negotiations immediately, and they arrive at the rendezvous point. And the rendezvous point is, of course, Deep Space Nine. They end up flying around a lot like the original opening of the TV series Deep Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and just looking over the station. I have to admit, I just was absolutely in awe, of the music and everything, because Deep Space Nine was one of my favorite of the Star Trek shows, and it was nice to see it again. And then they cut away to our favorite characters: Mariner, Rutherford, Tindy, and Brad, all looking out the window at Deep Space Nine. Rutherford, Tindy, and Brad have obviously never been there before, but we know from a flashback that yeah, Mariner's been there. She has a bit of a history, and they're talking about, they're going to go take a look around the station after they get done with their duties, and Mariner's like, "Oh no, I'm just going to hang out here and relax," and suddenly someone pops up from her bunk, and it's Jennifer the Andorian, asking if Mariner is free that day, and has said that she wants her to go meet her friends at a get together that they're calling a salon. So Mariner, of course, wants this to work because she is really happy in this new relationship she has with Jennifer. And Chris, what happens next?
Um, so the alien race, the Karima, come on board and they comment that they don't understand how they could have won the Dominion War. And the initial talk seems like it's not going to go well, but Captain Freeman, who has had enough time to prepare for the meeting, barely, says, "Well, we have some really nice gifts because they have a huge haul of beverages that they were taking to another rendezvous with the Vancouver. And, I'm sure that we will see all of these merchandise before the end of the year. But you see Romulan Ale, Vulcan Port, Rising Cabernet, about every possible beverage you can think of or we've heard in the Star Trek universe is on the ship now. And so the guy's like, well, okay, so if you have some gifts, we're here. We might as well stay and listen. And this creates a tour of the station where we hear him say, "Well, all I see is here are some tchotchkes and a tailor shop." I just want to stop on that for a moment, as that was a nod to the beloved Andrew Robinson's character of Garrick. And Captain Freeman sees that this is not really going anywhere, and he says, "But what about Quirks? Like, this is a place that is successful, has had franchises." And the guy's like, "Franchises?" And so, even though when Captain Mariner had first met Quark, he was all about, "Hey, what can we do to collaborate? Like maybe we can open up a Quarks at Starfleet Academy." Like he sees the Karima and he just like shuts up like a clam and doesn't want to have anything to do with them. And finally, Captain Freeman's like, "Well, Quark is really famous. Like, you have here the Quark 2000, which earlier in the episode, Quark says that the thing that makes his bar be apart from other bars in the quadrant or in the galaxy. It's like he has this unique device that creates like these very unique drinks, personalized." And the Korean's like, "Wait a minute here," and they've suddenly used a device that creates an EMP that shuts off all electricity on the station and to the Cerritos, which is docked on Deep Space Nine, and they take Quark away because clearly Quark is, once again, being Quark, is up to something that is like no good. And this has ramifications both for members of the Cerritos who are on the Karama's ship, taking aboard some of the beverages that we've mentioned before, and for the salon that's taking place with Jennifer's friends and with Mariner on board the ship. And Josh, do you want to take it from there?
Thank you, Chris. And one of the things that happens when Brad, Rutherford, and Tindy go to Quarks, which they got to go to because it is not just a franchise of Quarks, it's the original Quarks. And so Brad has started playing Dabo, which, of course, for those of you who do not remember Deep Space Nine, is kind of like a version of roulette, basically. Meanwhile, Tindy and Rutherford meet another Orion Starfleet officer, and he is, you know, asking Tindy, oh, you know about this, right? And all these Orion things and Orion customs, and asking her what was the first ship you stole, and all these things that are Tindy kind of considers to be negatives of Orion culture, because she became a Starfleet officer to kind of get away from the insanity of the Orion Syndicate. And when the just before the power goes out, um, Tindy and Rutherford are transporting some of the goods that the Cerritos has brought to the alien ship, and Maz the Orion shows up, and he wants to keep hanging out with them and ask her questions. Finally, Tindy just can't stand anymore. She tells him that she wants nothing to do with being a pirate, and she's embarrassed by their culture, and Maz takes affront to that. But then when the power goes out, they're suddenly trapped aboard the alien ship, and they realize that Quark has been abducted by these aliens. And Rutherford says, "Oh wait, we're trapped in here with a guy who knows how to, break out of doors and stuff. Maz, do something." And Maz admits he made it all up. That he is, in fact, while he is an Orion, he was adopted by humans, and he grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, of all places. So most of what he knows about Orion culture just comes from pulp fiction novels. Fortunately, Tendi takes the lead because she was trained as a pirate, even though she's rejected this part of her life. She goes into full Orion pirate mode and starts hacking into the ship's systems, opening doors, and fighting in a really badass martial arts style against the aliens, so that they are able to take the ship and ultimately rescue Quark. Meanwhile, back on the Cerritos, Mariner and Jennifer's friends are all trapped in these one of their in the quarters, and they cannot get out. Even the override doesn't work, and they have been doing this thing where they all lit candles and were sort of telling things about themselves. And the candles are still burning, and Mariner's realized, oh heck, um, all this, the reason the air is getting stale is because we've got all these lit candles and it's burning up all the oxygen, so we need to turn those off. But one of the girls objects because, hey, you're destroying my truth or something. And Jennifer urges Mariner to revert to type and just take charge of the situation, stop being nice to her friends. And so Mariner produces a phaser and starts stunning all the other girls in order to save the oxygen in the room. And Jennifer says, "Hey, I'm really glad you did that because I've been, wanting you to rip my friends a new one for a while." And Mariner's like, "Aw." And it seems kind of awkward that we're the only ones who didn't get stunned. And so Mariner and Jennifer kiss, and Mariner stuns them both. And that's kind of the end of that story arc. Meanwhile, when they get the alien ship back to Deep Space Nine, we find out that Quark actually stole the replicator from these aliens some years ago, and that he put his own codes in there, and that's why he's been kind of a success. So Colonel Kira and Captain Freeman come up with a solution that will, allow the aliens to turn a profit and keep Quark out of jail. And so they get 67% of all the stuff his franchises earn. Meanwhile, Brad has won a huge amount of latinum, which he trades for a Quark's gift certificate, and because saying that, well, we don't even use money in Starfleet, which annoys the Ferengi to no end. And that kind of brings us in. That more or less brings us to the end of the episode. So, Chris, I guess we're going to move into the good, the bad, and the Gorn. Chris, what did you think was best about this episode?
Well, it's hands down the return to Deep Space Nine. I mean, from the beginning of what do we do to save time? Well, just like fly around the pylons, which is a homage to the opening scene. The scene where we see Colonel Kira, and again, it's Nana Visitor voicing the character, and you walk in and you see the baseball is still on Cisco's old desk, and she makes a point of like hoisting on tossing the baseball for a couple of times. The fact that Quark is still there, and Armin Shimmerman returned to grace us with his voice for the character. Um, the fact that walking on the promenade, and even though we don't see him, there's a reference to like a tailor shop. I mean, just being back on Deep Space Nine after more than a decade. Many of us wanted to see Deep Space Nine on Picard, or we wanted to see it on Discovery, and it didn't happen. But now we finally have the return to Deep Space Nine, and everything that we saw in the designs, it just felt like Deep Space Nine, and the ship. I mean, the station, dare I say, even looks more impressive in animation than they did in the scale that they used when they're making the show, which of course makes sense because technology has advanced so much since then, and it makes you wonder how much more awesome would it look like if it was on a real show with the computer graphics and imagery that we have access to now. But um, other things I want to talk about that I liked about the show, but hands down, the first thing that stands out is like finally a return to Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, I love that part. There was in one of the trailers that aired on Star Trek Day. We did see that they were going to DS9, and I was real excited about that. And I was happy to be back. I felt like I was coming home for the first time in a very long time. Um, I've missed Deep Space Nine greatly, and especially because right before the pandemic, they revealed that they did have an idea, that the writers who had worked on DS9 did have an idea for a season 8, and unfortunately, we have lost two of the cast members, two of the more beloved cast members of DS9, Aaron Eisenberg and Rene Auberjonois, and uh, I kept thinking, from what they had said, it would have been a really awesome miniseries for Paramount Plus to do that return to Deep Space Nine. I don't know if it would ever happen, partially because while Armand and Nana clearly would love to come back, and I think Alexander Siddig and Nicole and Terry Farrell have all expressed interest. Even Michael Dorn has hinted that he would be willing to come back. Um, I I don't think I think Avery Brooks and Colleen are kind of the big holdouts for anything on that. But yeah, another thing I loved, and I noticed when I rewatched it again this morning, was that Rutherford at one point goes up to Jake and Nog's old spot on the promenade, where they used to look down at people, and Rutherford said that, "Oh, hey, I want to talk to this young junior reporter." And I'm wondering, oh, is Jake still there? I mean, I think it would have been nice, but I think we were supposed to get the impression initially that Jake, it kind of was out, not at Deep Space Nine anymore, but he was out in the universe living his life somewhere. Of course, it would have been nice to have had him come back too. Uh, what else did you enjoy, Chris?
I also enjoy that we got to see some Jennifer and Mariner time with Jennifer's friends, and I like the fact that you get to see how much a person will work to make a relationship work. In this case, Mariner's tendencies, as her friends point out, is to be bossy, but she's trying to like hold that back because she wants to fit in, not because she wants to be friends with these people, but she wants the relationship to work, and she recognizes that to have a relationship work, you need to make some like sacrifices, and here she's willing to do it, which shows like a real commitment. And I like that at the end, Jennifer's like, "Yeah, I brought you here really to boss them around," which is like a nice ending, and they phasure themselves, but you see not only the work that Beckett is willing to do to make this work, but it's a strong relationship that's just going to continue to develop. So I really like that we had part of the episode devoted entirely to the Jennifer and Mariner relationship, which is again something I've been talking about wanting to see on the show. So I'm really glad that that finally happened.
Yeah, I have declared for Team Marifer myself. I rather like that dynamic. I think that's going to draw more. I think it's going to get Mariner to talk more about her past as time goes on. because interesting thing is, while we had last week, of course, we had a big reveal for Rutherford, and then we've had Tandy this episode, talking about, obviously we knew from the episode where she and Mariner last season went to Orion, and we knew that her family was kind of high up, and so she had some more reveals about that this week. And of course, we found out at the season opener that Brad's family owned a raisin plantation. Yes, we just watched grapes dry, and he's evidently the hottest guy there.
But I want to follow up on that really quick. Even here in the salon, they're asking Mariner, like, is he seeing someone? Like, is he single? So Brad is actually, like, he's a magnet.
Yeah,
He brings it.
yeah. I mean, and he's so unaware of it. I
Yeah.
mean, that's so. I mean, maybe it's the purple hair or something, but yeah, he's another Kirk here, but I think he kind of has a mentality about romantic relationships similar to Picard's, and he's just kind of oblivious to it. Maybe we need to, find out why he doesn't seem to notice all these women find him attractive and would like to go out with him.
Yeah.
I wish I had his luck. I mean,
All of
uh,
us.
yeah, I was going to say about that, and another thing I was going to say about when Mariner, they asked Mariner to share something because they're talking about these things they had to, personal things that they overcame. Um, you know, Mariner kind of backs off. She does not want to share. There's like something, some big, thing I think would probably explain a lot about her character. She didn't feel comfortable with sharing. And I have a theory about that, but I'll get into that later in the show. Um,
So,
but
Josh,
yeah,
just because you mentioned Picard, so the other thing I liked is, in Picard we saw the Quark had franchise, but we didn't understand how that happened. And finally, in this episode, we get an explanation. Is, he stole technology that allowed him to build the Quirk 2000, which is like the one thing that allowed him to, like, expand his bar to other regions. So it's typical Quark. He stole something, and perhaps he did make it better, but it's not really his. So now we get an explanation of, like, why he has all these franchises. But now we also have an explanation, sort of like, he's not entirely successful because now he has to give away, like, 2/3 of his profits to the Bramler.
yeah. I mean, you could certainly make that argument to a lot of people. I mean, to a lot of things that, a lot of people create something and then somebody takes it, maybe makes it better and makes a huge profit on it. And it would be nice if they would give some of that profit back to the people who initially created it, or give more credit to those people for creating it. Obviously, being a comic book fan, you and I both know of quite a few people that created something, a really big comic book, and then years later had to go back and try to get some of that money back that the company made. I mean, I'm thinking of Jerry Siegel, who co-created Superman, and then how a lot of comic book artists came together to try to force DC to give him more credit and also to pay him a pension for doing that, for creating Superman. Um, I think that's one thing certainly comes to mind when I think about this. But what did do you have an example of something similar to that?
Oh, so many comic book artists. I mean, it's out of control. I mean, you look at, like I said, Batman. You look at Superman. You look at, all the comic book characters that have been created have gone on to be part of the Marvel TV and movie universe, and, like, how much of the funds are being received by the artists' families. I mean, probably not that much. I mean, there's far too many.
Oh yeah, I mean, you think about Spider-Man as, a multi-billion-dollar franchise for both Marvel and Sony. And while yes, Stan Lee, certainly he did quite well, what about Steve Ditko? What about his family? Are they seeing a percentage of the profits from, Spider-Man or Doctor Strange, which he did the original artwork for both books? Um, but obviously, I don't think we're going to solve something like that. But it's just a thought. We're just sort of throwing out there. But what are some things you didn't like so much in this episode that kind of the bad part?
I mean, this is going to be kind of weird for me because usually I'm the one who points out that, okay, like, what about this or what about that? But all in all, I mean, it's very hard for me to find anything that I didn't like about this episode. And it could be that I'm just, in for Deep Space Nine because I was also a huge fan. But there was nothing that really didn't work for me. I mean, maybe, and I'm nitpicking here a little bit, like all of a sudden that Captain Freeman is given like less than an hour to headlines important um, diplomatic negotiations. And I loved when he said a brown hole, which is the justification why the people who are originally supposed to do this can't headline the talks. He's like, that's not even a thing. Um, uh, that doesn't seem very practical, especially considering that she's the head of a California class ship, and you'd think there has to be someone who's head of like a Constellation class or something that Galaxy class that is closer by that could do this. But that's a really minor thing. And I guess because he was kidnapped, you don't see Quark intervening directly when Boimler, the Dabo King, is about to bankrupt him. And so I guess the very and they can't squeeze all the characters in. I totally understand that, but I would have liked to see. I mean, I love that we got a mention of a tailor shop, but I would have loved to have gotten just like a glimpse um, our favorite Taylor Garrick. That would probably be my one nitpicking thing. But again, I am really reaching because I just love the entire episode.
Yeah, me too. I had zero complaints about this episode. It hit all the right buttons for me. I just one thing I forgot to mention in the good. I forgot to mention how the back and forth between Kira and Shanks, that they knew each other back in the rebellion.
And it makes sense that they would.
Yeah, they were old buddies, and kept one upping each other. Like, you saved me from this, and you saved me from that, and I owe you for this, and I owe you for that. That was hilarious. I loved it.
I did like when Jack Sack says when they first see Deep Space Nine, he calls it a tacky Cardassian fascist eyesore. Because it makes total sense. Because as a resistance fighter, that's what he would call it. While everyone else is in Deep Space Nine, he's like, yeah, tacky fascist eyesore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it has become something that, after several decades has become, Bajoran property, licensed to Starfleet, but, is to a lot of people who remember it. Yeah, it was this Cardassian, it was not a pleasant place when it was Terok Nor. And, yep, that's how much of a geek I am. I do, we remember when the Cardassian designation for it, but yeah, that was I could see from his point of view that was really quite funny. I mean, well, it's not funny for him, but I mean, it's definitely funny for us, the audience, to watch that and see that, see his reaction to it. Um, Moving into the Gorn, it was something I wanted to bring up, and that was the character of Mars, the Orion, who was from Cincinnati, Ohio. Um, and how he was trying to, seem like more like an Orion to Tendi, which he didn't really have to do. In a lot of ways, he kind of reminded me a little bit of Worf in that um, much of Worf's life, obviously, he grew up on Earth, and what he knew about Klingons was, books and mythology and stories he had heard, that he had read, and practicing Klingon martial arts in a holodeck somewhere. He wasn't around real Klingons that much, and so when he got older and he joined Starfleet and he actually finally met with more Klingons, I think a lot of them were kind of a disappointment for him because they didn't live up to the standards that he thought they should. And here's Mars trying to, impress this hot Orion girl that he's just seen, who's also in Starfleet, and he's failing utterly because, hey, he's not. He wants to try to, prove that he's a real Orion, and that's not what she's interested in. Is because she's not comfortable with this part of her culture. What did you think?
Well, I thought the parallels to Worf were strongly there, and I think the episode made a good point of there is following a culture in a book, and then there's being part of the culture, which is like vast and experiencing it, which is vastly different because like the books are third party view, and they can create an impression of this is how it should be versus like this is how it is. And yeah, clearly, this is the first time he's seen an Orion in Starfleet besides him, parallels to Worf, and he wants to make an impression. But and at the end, like he kind of breaks down, and this is sometimes something you saw with Worf too, that he gets a little whiny, and he's like, "Oh, like I'm so sorry, I didn't really know about this." Worf, I think a lot of times would like do something similar and like, "Oh, it's about honor, it's about honor." Like anytime he didn't understand something fully, it's like, "Oh, it's about honor." So I like that the fact that also when confronted with the reality of what things are, and when you don't understand it, yeah, he does turn a little bit whiny, and I think both characters at times did. Um, and I like that both are able to see that some of what they read in the novels, when you get to it, actually is true. Like, Tandy doesn't want to do this, but when push gets to shove, like she admits, like her father's like a member of the Ryan Syndicate and is like a pirate captain. I mean, she does have the ability to do this and does successfully take over the ship, right? But doesn't want to promote a stereotype, which is obviously this is a stereotype that Orions have, that they're pirates, it's that that they're criminals, and C doesn't want to do that. But when push comes to shoves and the others need it, like C does, and then he gets to see that it's not all about what he's read in the cheap hollow novels. I think that's what he says, like the bad ones. That like a lot of these negative tendencies are emphasized, but that it is still part of the culture. And who knows, maybe now that he's seen her in action, he'll learn how to use the instrument that he was so proud of that he had at his hip.
Yeah, maybe. I think that I would like to see that character again at some point. See how he grows and tries to discover. Okay, there must be other things about Orion culture beyond being a pirate, or obviously, like with Klingons, there's obviously more to being a Klingon than just being a warrior. We've seen Klingons who did other things, and obviously we know that there are Klingon scientists, Klingon engineers, Klingon cooks and musicians and writers and such that we don't get to see as much of because they're all kind of in the Empire, and it's always the warriors we kind of encounter. So sometimes that's not always the best impression. And so obviously with the Orions, most people just encounter the pirates and don't realize that, yeah, there's a whole lot more to Orion civilization than greedy pirates who brutalize and steal people's ships and stuff.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah. So
even in Star Trek, like in Discovery, like what the Ryan Syndicate is the ones who like have a grip on the Federation and all the planets now that there's no dilithium before they discovered a planet full of it, right? Even in Strange New Worlds, like who's the people who capture Sarah Ruse and is used by oh god, and I'm forgetting her name, which I shouldn't because she's a brilliant captain, Captain Angel, used by Captain Angel to capture the Enterprise. It's like it's an Orion. So I love that on Lower Decks we actually get to see the opposite view that they're not all criminals and pirates. I mean, like here's someone who is like more than capable of being an effective science officer, and yes, he does have some of the characteristics that are attributed to the Ryans, but like he doesn't use it. And I thought this was a great opportunity for Mesk, who's from Cincinnati, Ohio, and again has read the Cheap Hollow novels, to see that there is just so much more that you can choose to be. So yeah, I don't like that. I understand why they're doing it, but I don't necessarily like that so much of Star Trek emphasizes the Orions as like as villains, as pirates. So I really like that you get to see the other side of this with lower decks. Much like with Nog, I mean, you saw the Ferengi was viewed sometimes as like only caring about money, but with Nog's character in Deep Space Nine, you saw like they can be a very effective Starfleet officer.
Yeah, well, I think the thing is in Star Trek, which is that when they get a character, whether it's a Vulcan, a Ferengi, a Klingon, etc., they get to explore that and they're going to be doing a show that's going to run 5 to 7 seasons. They get to explore that person's character, their culture, and so we get to know more about them. Whereas most of the Orions we have encountered prior to Tindy, we only see them for one or two episodes, and then they're gone. So we don't really get to know them
And
very well.
and again, maybe it's because it's animation, but I also am enjoying very much in Lower Decks. You see the relationships across species, and I just don't mean the relationship between Beckett Mariner and Jennifer, which is the Orion, which a lot of times you see in Star Trek the relationships are male based, and I'm so loving the fact that we get to see a female based relationship. I mean, I think that's long overdue, and or you get to see Dr. Tani and Shax. Maybe it's because it's too difficult due to like costumes and makeup, and just easier in animation. But I like to see the cross species relationships happening because it should not be only humanoid to humanoid. And again, I really like that we have a female based relationship. That in the previous Star Treks, you touch upon it a little bit for like one episode. Like Dr. Crusher had that one episode with the Trill, who then something happens and it becomes like a male. Or female, I think it was. But the fact that we have this is the strong relationship between Jennifer and Beckett Mariner is something I really enjoy about the show, and I love the fact we got to see more of it explored from like Jennifer's friend side with the whole salon concept, which was hilarious.
Yeah, I think that again we kind of get into stereotypes. It's like, you got this, some people, the stereotype about female bonding rituals, and now it's like some women, it's like, yeah, I'm not into that. I'm not
Yeah.
sitting around doing that. And I think with Jennifer, she likes the fact that Mariner is a bad girl, that she's take charge, don't take any crap. I'm not gonna wait around for you people to figure this out. I'm gonna get in there and fix this problem. Um, which I want to talk a little bit more about when we kind of get to well, actually I can talk about it here when we're in the
Okay.
Gorn.
Sure.
I think that might be part of her problem is she just, and I think we've touched on this before, she just doesn't have the patience for Starfleet protocol. She's just going to go do it. She's just going to go fix the problem herself, um, which is what she does very well. I mean, that does mold her in the tradition of a lot of very brash Starfleet officers, and does kind of go back to like, okay, um, Kirk's brashness and Picard's brashness got them promoted to captain. What happened with Mariner? And part of it is obviously we know Mariner doesn't want it, doesn't want to be an officer. She wants to just be on the Cerritos and be around her friends and explore stuff, you know, but she doesn't really care about rank and privileges that much. So, um, I think I think now it was a good time for us to go ahead and get into our predictions. So, Chris, if you don't mind, can I just build off what I just said
Sure.
about?
Go for it.
I think we're going to find out in coming episodes that Mariner. Well, I think we did have kind of hint in that flashback episode that Mariner was a commissioned officer at one point, and as we saw when the episode where they had the substitute captain who was an old friend of hers, that yeah, a lot of people thought that Mariner was going to, be captaining a Galaxy class or a Sovereign class by that point, and yet she was still an ensign living in a secondhand starship, um, and that's captained by her own mother. And people were wondering, okay, what exactly happened here, Mariner? What's going on here? I think we're going to find out Mariner might have actually achieved it for a little while, and something went wrong, and she doesn't want to be anywhere near command again. So she prefers to just be an ensign because Starfleet is the only thing that she has, and she doesn't really want to leave it. But at the same time, I think the thought of her having to be a captain or a first officer or something just probably terrifies her, even though she's got the ability to do it. But I think something went wrong at some point, and she doesn't want to be in that situation ever again.
Possible.
Yeah. So, what do you got for theories?
So, so far this season, we've seen a lot of background, and I'm glad we have on Tendi, Rutherford, Boimler. I think we were due for something about Captain Freeman. I mean, and I know that the opening episode of this season was about her being on trial, so technically it was sort of about her, but we haven't really seen a lot of background on her. So I think we'd do an episode where we're going to focus on the background of Captain Freeman.
Yeah, I think we're due for a background episode on her. In fact, I think we're due for a background episode on Shanks. Uh, I'm blanking on his name. The first officer,
Ransom.
Ransom. Thank you. I was just thinking about him a minute ago, and Dr. Talar, and yeah, I think we're due for some more background stories, but particularly Freeman herself. I mean, what was she like at Starfleet Academy? What was how did she meet her husband? What did she do in the Kobayashi Maru? You know, what's going on with her character? Because I mean, actually, she seems like she's such a competent and able captain that I mean, they did sort of hint at this last season that they were thinking about promoting her off of the Cerritos to a bigger ship, and she decided, no, I don't really want to do that. I like the ship I'm on right now. But was there a point that they were thinking about putting her on a Galaxy class or a Kira class or something like that?
Well, one thing I hope we do not see is I think we should not lose sight of the a person from the Valiant that we introduced to in the previous episode, and I hope we do not see this, which would be like some tragedy befalls Jennifer, and partly because Mariner could have done something to avoid it, but because he is told to follow Starfleet protocols, she does that, and something happens to Jennifer, which would then be an impetus to like, well, I'm leaving Starfleet now, and she goes to join the Independent Archaeologist Guild. So, uh, um, I still think we're going to see her leave Starfleet at the end of the season, and I'm hoping they're not building up a relationship with Jennifer to be the catalyst for something like this to happen.
Yeah. Um, I like Jennifer. I think she's a really great influence. I don't want to see her character leave anytime soon. I think Mariner obviously takes it pretty seriously. Obviously we saw in this episode and then the episode a couple of weeks ago where, uh, they were trying to pick up the crystals that cause you to have all these illusions. And, Jennifer turned into a werewolf and said, "Hey, why don't you? I want you to plant flowers with me and grow old and boring with me." And then it's like, okay, Mariner's probably both afraid of that and kind of wouldn't mind doing it either. So I guess we'll see. I hope you're right. I do think. Well, I mean, right or wrong, I do think that there is a possibility that yes, something happening to Jennifer could be the thing that prompts Mariner to leave Starfleet and join the Independent Archaeology Guild or whatever. And but that they may be setting up for that, or I guess something could happen there. But I hope that we don't see the end of Team Marifer anytime
Yes.
soon. I kind of I like that. And actually, I'd love to see Jennifer, kind of running around with the rest of the team, doing stuff. So even though she's a lieutenant and they're all ensigns, so but I think Starfleet, the lines are kind of blurry about officer and NCO relationships. I think we've seen over the past 55 years that they don't have the same kind of issues that they have in the in today's armed forces. So, but at any rate, I think this was the best episode of the season, in my opinion. It was nice seeing Deep Space Nine again and seeing the Na Visitor and Armin Shimmerman. And I think, I don't know what they're going to do for the rest of the season, but this was terrific, and I look forward to, as always, another week of another episode next week, Deep Space Nine. So, Chris, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Um, Thank you, Josh. So, people who are interested in following my work can find me on Instagram. It's Verde Cosplay. And if you are in the DC area and are attending any of the recent cons, such as Monster Mania, big shout out to Monster Mania that just happened and is still happening this weekend. Go onto my gram and see if you can find yourselves there. And also another shout out to our friends at Farpoint, who just had a big announcement for something really big that's going to be happening in Farpoint in February. An interview and a talk with a very good director.
Ah, I'm intrigued. I had not heard this yet. Uh, well, as always, you can find me at Josh Pritchett on Facebook, or actually Josh Pritchett Jr. on Facebook, and also at the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup group on meetup.org. And next week, I will be in Weir's Cave, Virginia at the Bigfoot conference there, where I will be signing copies of my book, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural. If you'd like to come by, say hi, or um, buy a book. I love to sell books, of course.
And
And
Josh, aren't you going to be at 4.2 next year?
I will be. Yes, I will be. I will be a featured writer. I will be on Writers Row this year. So that's another bucket list thing I could check off there. Is I will be on Friday night. I will be down there with the rest of the writers with my own table, my own name tags, and be selling copies of books. And I'm hoping that I will have a second or maybe even third book out by then that I will also be hyping. So fingers crossed, and I'm going to be putting in a lot of hard work this week on those projects. So at any rate, once again, I am Josh Pritchett, and this is my partner in crime.
Peace and long life.
Live long and prosper.